Hello, everyone. Welcome to my live stream. I see a couple of people are already here. It's great to see you. If you have any comments or questions or book-related things to talk about, leave them in the comment section down below. I have a couple of topics I can talk about before if we don't have any comments to begin with. But part of this is to celebrate that we reached 1,500 subscribers this week, which was really exciting. There's a couple of other things happening. I got the first paycheck from YouTube, which was very exciting. And so I was able to use that money to buy a new bookshelf to expand the studio, which is really exciting. I see we already have our first comment in today. We have Steve Holm says, hello, hope you are well. Congrats on 1,500. Hello, Steve. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the comment. I see Lazy Fishy is also here. Hello there. General Kenobi. Good to see you. So real quickly to show off this is the new bookshelf here. It's the same design as the one that's always been behind me, but as you can see, it goes up here and goes pretty far low. And that's a new bookshelf, so I'm able to expand out my expanded universe Star Wars books, because before I had to have them all hidden below me, but now they can be right next to me, easy to grab. So it makes things a lot better, I think. And then I have my Star Trek books a little bit lower, which is a little bit sad, but unfortunately the Star Trek videos aren't necessarily what's generating interest with people. So I'm going to continue making those videos, but I'm not going to have them in as much prominence in the studio. And we still have more bookshelves over here. So there's still more bookshelves here. I just moved them a bit when I got the new one. And so I'm hoping to be able to rearrange the fantasy stuff soon, because I have some new hardcover fantasy and trade paperbacks. Then I want to move the mass market away, since the mass market, I think, doesn't look quite as good overall. But that's the new setup. Thank you, Lazy Fishy. I am glad that it looks good. The first thing I'll show is, I sometimes like to do this with some live streams, is to give you guys a sneak peek. I try to do a TBR video every month, but I thought I'd go ahead and give the live stream a sneak peek on my TBR for the month of October. So the here's the list of books. I have like 9 books planned. The first book is the only tome. I've been doing like 2 to 3, maybe even 4 tomes a month, and I just couldn't keep up with it once school started and I started teaching. So I'm pulling back a little bit, and I'm just doing a few tomes. And so I'm just doing one this month, and that's Destiny. It's the 3rd book in the Rhapsody trilogy, the Symphony of Ages. I loved the first book, and I am just this week starting book 2. So this will be book 3 that I'll read in October, and I'll finish that trilogy. There's books that come out later, but it was originally just a little trilogy. Then I have Dawn Shard by Brandon Sanderson that I'm really excited to get into. It's a novella, but it's really close to being like a short novel almost. It's really small compared to other books out there, but I'm interested in reading it. I also have a few Star Trek novels. I have the Typhon Paths of Disharmony and Plagues of Night that I'll read this month for Star Trek. There's no new Star Trek releases this month, sadly. And then I have Spinneret by Timothy Zahn, which I'm really excited. I love Timothy Zahn's science fiction. And so I'm interested. This is one of his older books, so I'm interested in reading it. I have a comment from Steve Holm that says, "Oh, Brandon, just finished The Final Empire. Was amazing." Yes, Final Empire, or also known as Mistborn, is an amazing, amazing book. If you haven't read the others, like every Brandon Sanderson book I recommend, they're all amazing, particularly Elantris, Warbreaker, the Stormlight Archive, and Mistborn. All of them are amazing. But I mean, everything else he writes is great. And then I also have the first David Weber book in his Honor Arrington series to read this month, On Basilisk Station. Never read David Weber before, but he's big in the science fiction community, so I thought I'd give him a try. And so that'll be his book. And then I have Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park. I've had this on my shelf for a while. I've been getting into newer genres. This is like a science fiction, more heavy on the science part. And so I'm interested in reading this, which I think should be fun. I saw Murphy Napier's review of the book when she read it a few years ago, and she loved it. She thought it was amazing. So I'm hoping that I will love it as well. And then we have the third book in the Hunger Games trilogy, Mockingjay. I think this will be a lot of fun. I absolutely loved books 1 and 2. I thought they were both so well paced, so well designed, so impressive, and so creative at the time. Now the formula's all over the place, but at the time this was really creative. So I'm really excited to read that. And then there's a new Star Wars book coming out, which I don't have the cover of because it hasn't come out yet, but it is one of the new High Republic YA novels. I think it's Paths of Convergence or something like that, and Paths of Deceit maybe. And that book is coming out very soon, so I'm super excited to read that. To read that book when it comes out in October. If you have questions on anything book related, fantasy, sci-fi, political thriller, legal thriller, I'm getting a legal thriller now. Leave them in the chat and I'll try to respond if I can. Obviously, there's some books that I just haven't read, so I don't know everything, but I always love the chat because I always get introduced to new stuff, which can be, I think, a lot of fun. And so one thing I just finished this week, the video will come in about a month, was my review of A Time for Mercy by John Grisham. I thought this was an absolutely stellar book. I read the first 2 books in this series. It's just following this character, A Time to Kill and Sycamore Row. I thought both of these were amazing books, top books of the year for me. And this one is also a top book of the year, but not the top book. We have some comments. Good to see. Steve Holmes says, I'm surprised that they are starting this High Republic phase with a YA. Let's hope it's good. Yes, I hope it is good. I have not been impressed with the YA as much. I thought that the adult novels have been better overall. That being said, they can always surprise me. So, and Lazy Fishy says phase 2 starts soon, right? From High Republic. Yes, phase 2 starts in October with the YA novel by Justina Ireland and another writer, which I'm blanking on the other writer's name. And then in November, we have 2 books coming out. We have the High Republic adult novel, which is by Zoraida Cordova, an author who I've enjoyed a lot. Tessa Granton, thank you, Steve Holm. Tessa Granton. I knew I knew that name. So that's that. They do the YA, and then Zoraida Cordova is doing the adult novel from Del Rey in November, and then also in November we have a middle grade, and it is by the guy that did all of the. He did like the really creative middle grade-ish books that had to do with like the legends of the myths and fables. He did the myths and fables books. And he works with Kevin Scott quite a lot on a lot of things. He did the Life Day Treasury with him. And so he's writing the middle grade one, which I'm really excited for because the middle grade books have surprised me. But I'm hoping that this one continues that good trend. I'm most excited for the adult novels because I think Zoraida Cordova has a good track record, and also I think that the adult novels are the best in the line. I do have a full video just ranking all of the Star Wars adult novels. It goes over 40 adult novels in the canon. It's a lot. It's a long video. But it's a lot of fun. Next, we have John Krasnowski. I hope I'm saying that right. Have you ever read the book on Chegs? I have not. If you want to tell me a little bit more about that book, I have not. I am not aware of it. Johan Herrenbook. Hello, Johan. Says, hi, Jonathan. Which High Republic novels are absolutely essential if you want to get a flavor? Well, if you just want a little tint of the series, you don't want to get the full series, I'd stick with just the first adult novel, read Light of the Jedi. And then if you, after reading Light of the Jedi, say, you know what, didn't enjoy it, it's not for me, the rest of the series is probably not going to be for you. And I wouldn't bother with the YA and middle grade because while they have different styles, like I don't like the YA style and I kind of like the middle grade, they still keep the same feeling as the adult novels. and I think the adults are the best. So if you can't enjoy the best, which is the adult novels, then you probably won't enjoy the rest. So I'd start with Light of the Jedi, and that is the first book in the series. It's what kicks it off. And if you enjoy that, then continue on and read all the other books, depending on whether you want all the adult novels or just the middle grade and young adult or everything. But if you start with Light of the Jedi, that's a good way to just understand, get your toe wet. It's kind of like, I would recommend, if you're interested in the new Jedi Order, read Vector Prime. A lot of the new Jedi Order books have differences, but some of them also pretty much have the same overall tone. So if you read the first one and don't enjoy it, well, maybe you don't need to continue on, but that's how I'd explain it. He says, Johan says, okay, will do. Thanks for asking for advice. I always love introducing people to new types of books. I really think that this initiative, they've done a lot correct with it and a lot that's incorrect, but the bold strategy is worth it. I do think that it was smart that they decided to try something new. They didn't just announce they were doing an interconnected series. They announced an interconnected series that went across different spectrum of publishing. I would have just kept it just the adult novels if it was just me, but I recognize that the other imprints need books to publish, and they were having a lot of hard time publishing YA and middle grade. It was really hard getting those books published because everything happened to be going to the adult novels at Del Rey. So I think that it was a smart idea to at least try something new. And they've got a little trial and error. They know what authors work, what don't, what types of books in the series work. So I think that it's overall been a good success. If you're just joining us, thank you for joining the live stream. I am talking anything about books, so if you have any comments whatsoever, leave them in the chat down below. Let me know any thoughts, any comments you have on books, anything like that. We're just celebrating the new subscriber count reaching 1,500 and just hanging out talking about books. So John Krasnowski answering my previous question is, it's the one where the son leaves his father's house and it makes my knees hurt. I'm in agony. The son where the leaves his father's house. I've not heard of this, but I will have to look it up on Goodreads. Len says, hello, Jonathan. Have you read 50 Shades of Chegg? I've heard of 50 Shades of Grey, which is another book which I have not read. I've never heard of that. I'm interested that multiple people have brought up the idea of Chegg as a book. That's really interesting. Steve Holmes says, I'm glad they decided to create an entire era and new characters. Keeps things fresh, and I think it worked well. That was the problem that the canon had, was it just had those backstory books. It just had those little self-contained books that had nothing on the greater universe. They had occasionally an aftermath would come along that would get bigger, but even that was not as big as we needed it. And so they had been so self-contained. And then so when they did this, it really exploded. It went to the furthest limit of big epic scope that they could possibly go. So you got the two extremes in the canon. You have the super interconnected, huge things happening, and the really self-contained stuff. So you can get both sides. I think that the EU does this, but in a more centralized way, where some things in the EU, you could read any of the EU series and understand them, but they were also pretty interconnected, that if you had been reading everything, you did feel rewarded. And I feel like the canon needs to just eventually get everything into that middle ground, because it's just currently on the two extremes, which I don't think is the wisest move for to just have the two extremes. Then again, there's so many easy ways that I could just say, boom, standalone novel for you and for you, based on different people's, it's so easy to recommend canon books to people based off their likes and dislikes in Star Wars, that having the little standalone aspect is kind of helpful to ease readers in. So it's really complicated trying to get people in Star Wars now, because there's just so much. That's how I feel with Star Trek. When people ask me about Star Trek novels that I recommend, it's so hard to just say this is where you start, because there's so many likes and there's so many types of things people dislike in Star Trek that it's hard to narrow it all out to just the types of books that they'll enjoy. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how Phase 2 works, whether the sales will be as good, and also whether the ratings will continue to be as good, because the ratings have been pretty good so far on them. So we'll see if they continue to be that good. So, if you've just joined us, hello, thank you for joining. If you have any comments, leave them in the comments section. Lazy Fishy says, "What's an era where you would like to see more books, and what story would you like to be told?" All right. So, first of all, here's one era that I think people are going to say the Old Republic, and I agree because it's such a huge amount of time, and they don't have to get in the way of anything. So, uh, there's it's called or because the Old Republic has like 4,000 years of time. That being said, what I would suggest is to get about maybe like 50 years in the time period, like some just somewhere, and just let one author tell like a fantasy type story with big, huge, epic political battles and big everything, and make something huge. Uh make something really um make something really big, but let it be one author, because the problem is that when you have too many authors, they can get different tones and they can get things wrong. So I just want one author, like a Drew Karpyshyn type person, to just come in, take about 50 years in the timeline and really fill it out themselves. Then again, I'd also really like to see more in the post Return of the Jedi, because we need more post Return of the Jedi canon books. They really need to do that. So that's my answer to there. Revan says, "Hey, Jonathan, may not be able to contribute to chat much because I'm on baby duty right now, but I'm here." Oh, thank you, Revan. If you haven't seen Revan's channel, Caleb Likes Books, you should, because Caleb is great and his videos are wonderful, and he's very underrated in the booktube sphere. But yes. Dyson has a comment retracted. I saw that. Len says, "Oh, yes, that's right. I got distracted by the previous comment." Yeah. If you meant 50 Shades of Grey, no, because I don't really read smut. So that's what I'm talking about. Johan Herrenberg says, "You are a book guy, but have you watched Andor? I like it." So, yes, I have watched Andor. I've watched the first three. I really enjoyed watching it, and my podcast, Two Sons of Tatooine, will be reviewing it. It's not like if they were to tailor make, this is tailor made to me. That's not the show for me. But I like having a show that talks about rebels versus the empire, that builds up over time. That's a longer show. We have 12 episodes as opposed to just like 6 episodes for Kenobi and 7 for Book of Boba Fett. We have 12 episodes here, and they're really focusing on getting the writing right. They're really hoping to get all the universe new, so that they're not like just making it just a reference fest. So I'm enjoying Andor. It's not a favorite yet, but we'll see. If the stuff with Mon Mothma is good, that'll really raise it up. That's what you have to nail that for me. The Andor stuff doesn't matter how good it is. If you don't get Mon Mothma, your show won't be entertaining to me. But I'm still really enjoying it. Revan1207 says, "High Republic ranking coming Monday." Ooh, yes, that's wonderful. And Steve Holmes says, "Looking forward to it." That's wonderful. I will definitely watch that video. High Republic ranking is so much fun. That video that I did on my ranking the High Republic was really, really popular. I would say it's one that really took off on the channel, thankfully. The next comment is from Schmackmut Helmer, I hope I'm saying that right, says, "I challenge you to a jousting match. Stand and deliver." I'm not much of a jouster. I'm not much of a physical activity person. Challenge me to reading something, hey, that I can do. But challenge me to jousting, I like having my face and not, getting murdered. So probably not doing jousting. I've seen Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. I know what happens to people who joust. So I don't think so, Helmer. But John Krasnowski says, "Have you read Nygar's new novel? It's a nice nod to the Star Wars movie." I have not. I've not heard of who Nygar is, but I have my phone here where I'm taking notes, and I will take note to look up Nygar's movie or Nygar's new book, because anything that has like references to Star Wars or like homages to Star Wars, I really like. So Nygar's new novel. All right, I have it written down, so I'll have to look that up after this stream is done. But Yeah, I'm back to Revan. I'm really excited for that ranking video. It's so shocking how on YouTube you have regular videos like reviewing stuff, and then you have a video talking on just like a news topic or something like that, and then you have a video doing a ranking. My ranking videos are always substantially higher than anything else, and it's just so shocking to me that like that's the only thing that really gets views is those ranking videos. Um, uh, Griffin says, "Hey, Mr. Cohn, congratulations on 1,500 subscribers." Thank you, Griffin. That's so nice. Thank you for being here today. Helmer says, "The only thing I want you to read is the end of my lance." Ha ha ha! That is entertaining. That was funny. That was funny. Steve Holmes says, "Do you think you will give the Witcher series a shot?" I'm not sure whether you're referring to the book series or the TV series, so I'll assume you're saying both. So for the book series, I do want to read it one day, but as always, I have a billion books on my list. But because it's been adapted, it makes me more interested in reading it. So many people really recommend it. The video game series, no, because I don't really play video games, so can't really say I'll get into it. But the book series, perhaps one day, and the TV show, I am interested in it because I enjoy Henry Cavill, and I like the head writer of the series. The head writer of the Witcher series worked on The West Wing, which is my favorite TV show ever. The and so her working on that makes me interested to see if she incorporated any references to The West Wing in her Witcher series. Probably not, but you never know. So, but I will read it one day, but maybe. Johan Herrenberg says, "What is it about John Jackson Miller that makes him your absolute favorite?" This one is interesting because it's very hard to tangibly put an answer on this one because he doesn't necessarily have like a specific style like say some of the other Star Wars authors have. Delilah Dawson and Chuck Wendig, they're very visceral in their writing. Whereas you have someone like Timothy Zahn, he's very flowery with his writing. You have someone like Zoraida Cordova, who's very romantic in her writing. There's different types of writing styles. John Jackson Miller, to me, gets how to write media tie-in fiction, and he just gets the types of novels I'm interested. His plots are always engaging. His character work is always engaging. His dialogue feels like the characters in the movies or shows that he's writing as part of would. It seems like his types of his writing is what I'm looking for. He tells the types of stories, the types of dialogue that I want to see in novels. And in addition to that, also, he does really good job of writing light themes without going too far. Some authors are so thematic, it feels like they're hitting you in the head with something. Instead, he will have a theme that's really light, and so you have to really pay attention to it in order to pay attention. And he's very apolitical, so you have no idea what he believes about anything, really. He just wants to be able to write in the universe and have fun with it. And so he's not coming with any agenda on any side. He's just writing a fun book. And so as a result, and he's really good at adapting, if he goes to write Star Trek, it's a Star Trek novel that he's writing. And if he goes to write Star Wars, and if he's writing a specific series in Star Trek, it's that type of thing. So that's why I really enjoy his writing style a lot. I hope that explains everything. Kranowski says, "My knees are in agony." I'm sorry, Johan, John. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Len says, "Have you heard of Help Me It Hurts by Mike Umsgreen?" I have not. I've not heard of that. Is that a contemporary novel? I don't read too much contemporary, although I have about a dozen contemporary on my list that I have read. I just haven't read that one. Schmacker says, "Have you read Chegg's Education?" No, I had someone earlier suggest. Oh, I think that was you. I think was that you, Schmacker? I'm not sure. But Chegg's Education, I've not heard of that one. So I'm sorry, I can't speak to that one. Elijah Speaks says, "Hello, Mr. Cohn." Hello, Elijah. Glad that you're able to join us. If you have any book questions, I'm always interested in talking books. Also, to go back for a second on John Jackson Miller, one thing I really like is that he is a very funny interviewer. So I really like looking back at his interviews and seeing some of the jokes that he talks about that I can notice in his books, the types of funny things that he will put in there. And so that's why I really enjoy rereading his books, because I'm always finding little references that he likes to put in, whether it's Star Wars and Star Trek or something else. He sometimes puts Lone Ranger references in his books. Anything that he can make in the tie-in community. I think that Christy Golden is good at this. That Christy Golden is good at adapting whatever series she's in. When she was in World of Warcraft or Star Wars or Star Trek, or she was in some stuff with Spielberg, whenever she's adapting something or working in another universe, she's good at working with that universe. Have you read In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust? I have heard of it. I have not read it. I am not sure the genre, but I remembered seeing the title In Search of Lost Time. So I will have to look at that one. I will put that on my list on my phone that I'm making here. In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. All right, I will put that on my list. I'm really enjoying. I'm about to start today. I'm going to start City of Ember, because my class is reading that. Although I'm not the teacher for reading in my school, so I'm not teaching City of Ember, but my class is reading it. And so I was like, hey, I'll pick this up, read it in a day, catch up with the students, have fun talking with them about it. So I'm really excited to talk about City of Ember. Zane Rose says, hi, hey, I'm currently reading Heir to the Empire, and I plan to finish the rest of the trilogy. What should I read next? If you want to stay in the EU, there's a couple of avenues. One is to go next in the timeline would be the Jedi Academy trilogy. I think that that would be a really entertaining next step. It's a bit different in writing style from the Thrawn trilogy, but it's still a really good Star Wars story. But I think that a better series is one that takes place right beforehand, right before the Heir to the Empire trilogy, and that is the X-Wing series. I think that the full X-Wing series, at least the first 4 books by Michael Stackpole, are stellar. I think that the other ones are stellar for different reasons, but I think that the first 4 by Michael Stackpole are probably the best to go with in style, and then maybe go through the Jedi Academy series next. I still think there are you could jump to other parts in the timeline if you want to go to the Clone Wars era. There's some great Clone Wars novels, some post Order 66 novels, and then there's also some good Old Republic novels. But if you're staying in the post Return of the Jedi universe, the Jedi Academy trilogy and the X-Wing first 4 X-Wing books are good, and then do iJedi, because they all come together there. Johan Herrick says, Shadows of the Sith. Some commenters praise it to the skies, but I remember that you were more critical. I don't feel... I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. Like, I gave it like a 8 out of 10, I think, or 7 out of 10, somewhere in that range. Like, I think that it did a lot of hard work for the Star Wars universe. It was able to expand answers about Luke, answers about Lando, answers about the Rey, about the whole Ochi of Bestoon. It answered a lot of Star Wars questions, but the problem with it is that as its own story, it didn't feel as entertaining. It felt like it was forced to answer questions. So it didn't feel too much like its own self-contained, just fun story that, happened to answer this question. That was one thing that Kevin Anderson was good at when he was writing Star Wars, is it would be, there's this fun story. And over here, I'm going to explain the Kessel Run real quick. Like, it didn't feel like the whole book was about explaining the Kessel Run. He would just do it in the book. It would just naturally occur. And that's the problem, is that this whole book, Shadow of the Sith, felt like it was a let's answer these questions. And it's still entertaining, but it's not as entertaining if it had been like its own novel that happened to answer questions. So that's how I feel about it. Elijah says, Miss Scoggins made us read City of Ember last year. Yeah, the 5th grade at our school has to read City of Ember. It's a great... I've heard great things about it, and my other teachers have also said they really enjoyed it. So Schmacker says, what are your thoughts on Ivan Eriksson? Ivan Eriksson. I don't know that one. I know Steven Erickson. That's the only Erickson I really know. Billy Bear Comics says, hello, how are you doing? Great to see you, Blueberry Comics. I'm really glad you're here. Thanks for being here. I'm doing great. I was sick all this last week, and I had to fight it off to try to be work ready. But I'm feeling much better now. It's like 90% gone, 95% gone. So Krasnowski says, Chegs is an awesome trilogy. The Chegs Return is the best title. However, Chegs Education. There's Kronowski, you're all about the Chegs. I'm wondering if it is. Steve Holmes says, I don't know about you, but these Chegs guys sound like trolls or bots. I'm wondering because I'm really curious. Len says, how about Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist? Incredibly spiritual. My roommate read The Alchemist and loved it. And one of our friends also read The Alchemist and said that he really enjoyed it. So I'm interested in it. I'm not into I don't like horror or stuff that gets into the weird spiritual stuff. So I'm like always kind of careful. But I've heard such good things about The Alchemist that I might be able to try it. So Revan 12 cents says, I was kind of disappointed by the first X-Wing book. It wasn't bad, but it was just kind of meh for me. I could see that if you are not all bought in on the whole space battle stuff, it might not be for you, and which is why the X-Wing books sold well but weren't the best. But I really enjoyed them myself. I think that book 3 is by far the best. By far. I thought books 2 and 4 were also really good. Book 1 is probably the weakest. But I think that book 3 far and away, like it's the book that shocked everyone that it sold so well. I was amazed at how good book 3 was, and I think that that's why it broke all the records that it did. So Blueberry Comics says, oh, I'm sick now, so I feel you. Yeah, I feel you. Blueberry Comics. Lazy Fishy says, I am planning to read the Legacy of the Force series. What would you recommend to read before that to get to know the characters better, or can I just jump into it? Well, if you've never read any other Star Wars books, that might be difficult. I'm not sure the extent of how much you've read. I'll just say this. Jason and Jaina Solo are characters that are throughout all of the Star Wars are throughout the whole Star Wars universe. So there's a lot of books with them in the Legacy of in the New Jedi Order. That being said, they do a good job in the beginning, in the first book, in Betrayal, of setting the stage and explaining everything to you. So I think you could jump in if you needed to. You might be a little bit confused of, a few characters here and there, but generally one thing that the Star Wars authors in the EU in particular, but in everywhere that they do well, is explaining what you need to know, the pertinent information. They realize that every book is somebody's first, so they want to be able to have that first book feeling. So you can. I think that it's better to read everything else because it makes the Legacy of the Force more impactful. It's most impactful if you've read everything else. That's why I always say read everything in release order. But you can still read it anyway. So that's my thoughts on that. Let's see the next comment. Blueberry Alchemist says, oh, The Alchemist. My whole family has read except me, so I think I'll give that a shot soon. Yeah, everyone talks about it. It's one of the older books. Blueberry Comics says, I'm currently reading The Last Kingdom. I finished the first book and I'm now reading the second. It's my first historical fiction series. What a shame, because I'm a huge history nerd. Historical fiction I've always been reticent to get into because I've been afraid that they wouldn't write the type of historical fiction that I would like. There was a video game that I played that was called The Guild 2 Renaissance, and it was basically like a historical fiction game. I loved that game, and it mixed fantasy elements like medieval times, storytelling, and big epic scope of stuff, but it didn't have magic. It was just medieval times stuff. And I would really like to get a book series that has that kind of a feeling to it. And I've heard Last Kingdom has the Viking side of it, of historical fiction, really good. So I would be interested in reading The Last Kingdom. And I know that one of the booktubers that I really, really admire, Patrick Leo, he just talked about how much he liked The Last Kingdom, that whole series, and then also the TV show as well. Although I'm not sure if I'd watch the TV show, but I would. That if I'm going to jump into that is one I would want to read. I do have a historical fiction book that I just purchased recently by Ken Follett, called The Pillars of the Earth. I don't know much about this book, but I know that Brian Lee Durfee, a book reviewer, he loved it. So I will get into this eventually, but it's like 1,000 pages long, and it's really small print, and it's a thick book. So it's not high on my list yet. It's just I have it here, so I might get to it one day. We'll just see how that goes. Because I have so many smaller books I want to get to first. Blueberry Comics says, anyways, any horror book plans for Halloween? No, for the month of October, I'm mostly sticking to the traditional ones, fantasy, science fiction, and young adult for right now. I have read through all of my Dan Wells books, and I wanted to get more. If I had another Dan Wells book on my list, I would read another of his horror novels. I just don't have any at the moment. And I don't really have any horror novels like in my stack to reread currently. And I could go out and get one, but I'm not that much of a horror reader. I would rather get my traditional genres in first. So I'll do a horror novel whenever it pops up on my shelf. So I'm thinking of Samuel Slot. Yeah, I heard good things about that. I want to say that's one that Murphy Napier really enjoyed, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Ian X says, how do you feel about the Jedi Academy trilogy? It's not the best EU series or even EU trilogy ever made, but I still think it's actually really quite entertaining. I think that Kevin Anderson is an underrated author. He always gets overlooked by everyone in no matter the genre, in fantasy, science fiction, political thriller, regular thriller, horror, whatever. Every genre, he gets overlooked because of his writing style, which is very basic and which is very plot driven. I enjoy those types of books quite a lot. It's why I keep reviewing all of his books so much. So that's why I really enjoy his books. Then again, he's not the best. I don't think that his Jedi Academy trilogy is the best series in there. I think it's really good. I think it pairs really good with iJedi. If you read them together, it makes you love each one better. If you eat just one or just the other, it's not worth as much to you. So, Steve Holmes says, Utini has a good list of all the Legends books in chronological order if people want to do some research. Yes, Utini is a great research facility. I believe they used to sell Star Wars books, and they had a subscription box. I don't know what happened to it. It just like fizzled out, and nobody talks about it anymore. Like we don't even reminisce about it. But Utini has a good place for that. I also think that another good place is Wikipedia. Wikipedia has a lot, but Wikipedia will throw the information at you. Boy, will Wikipedia give you a lot of information. So there's that. Let's go to the next comment from Arthur Lowry. Hello, Arthur. Glad you could join me. Says, have you heard or read the Airborne trilogy of young adult books by Kenneth Uppel? They are Airborne, Skybreaker, and Star Climber. I thought they were great, kind of steampunk sci-fi fantasy. Haven't read them. YA genre is something I want to get into more, but I haven't. And I'm like making an attempt to. So I'm reading the big ones now. Like I've read through Harry Potter. I'm currently reading through the Hunger Games. And my next one after that will probably be the what's it called? The Aragon series, and then I'll start getting into the more recent ones if I can. So I have my list here. I'm going to put that on my list. Kenneth Opal's Airborne. There we go. Lowry says, also, I find the Disney canon middle grade books are mostly forgettable, but to join the Resistance series was very fun. Have you read it? I would recommend it. I only really have read the middle grade for the High Republic, and then I've read like 2 other middle grade books. So again, I found them overall very forgettable. Surprisingly, I thought that the last middle grade book they did, Mission to Disaster, was like on par in its quality with an adult novel, but they tell such short stories. And they have to be careful because they can't deal with mature themes. So like people don't die really in those stories. And so there's no stakes. And so it's really hard to get into them because they really are kids' books. If you're a kid, they're tailor-made for you and they're wonderful. But sometimes it's not the best, which that's the problem with making kids' books, young adult books, and adult books and trying to expect everyone to read all of it because there's a little bit of a overlap there. So Author Lowry says, glad you enjoyed the Jedi Academy. Me also. Yep. Glad to find other people that love it. Revan says, I've got some Lovecraftian cosmic horror to read in October. Very little actually by Lovecraft, so it'll be interesting to get that style from other authors. Yeah, I love it when I can read of an author and then find people who mimic that style. I'm reading through a lot of John Grisham legal thrillers, but I want to see what's out there beyond just Grisham. So I want to read people who write legal thrillers in a similar way, but aren't specifically John Grisham books. So that's that type of thing. I want to get it to people who write horror, but I want it the Dan Wells style because I think that style is good, except his endings are so frustrating. But Dan Wells, his horror, I think that's a kind of a staple of the horror genre to not like the endings. But I agree. I do like to find a specific author like Brandon Sanderson for fantasy or Timothy Zahn for science fiction, or that type of thing, and then find people who write like them in that genre. Blueberry Comics says, have you watched Andor? If so, what are your thoughts and how does it compare to Kenobi? So I was more excited for Andor as a series ahead of time of Kenobi, just because I was more interested in a Rebel Alliance versus Empire story than it was a Jedi Caper, because I didn't think that it would add that much to the Star Wars universe. And I enjoyed Kenobi a lot. It wasn't a favorite, but I enjoyed it a lot. But I think that Andor will be better. The problem is they made a big mistake with the first 3 episodes having no greater ties to the Star Wars universe. It makes it really hard to get casual fans involved. Casual fans, I think, are not going to love it as much. My parents, I was shocked. They watched the first 3 episodes and they loved it. And they are the most casual of casual fans. They watch the TV shows and movies and that's it. They don't read books, comics. They don't play video games. They don't care. So I was shocked that they enjoyed it. And so maybe it will catch on. And they watched it, eventually. They wasn't like they stayed up till midnight to watch it. So I don't know whether it'll continue to catch on, but I heard that the later episodes get really, really, really good. So I'm hoping so. I'm crossing my fingers that it will continue to be good. It was entertaining and the writing was really consistently good. That's what you need, consistent writing. And then if you add references to that, it'll be all great. So, next comment says, Lazyfish says, I have Death Troopers and Kenobi on my shelf. I know that you love Kenobi. Is Death Troopers any good? That is one of the few Star Wars books I have not read, is Death Troopers. I want to one day, but it's not really in used bookstores. It's only in new bookstores. It's like, if I'm going to spend money on a new book, I'm going to get one that I'm excited about. I spend money on used books. That's a book I need to eventually read, I'll throw that on the shelf. New books are like, I want to read this now. So if I find it on a used bookstore, I might catch it, but it just depends. Next comment is from Johan Herrenberg. You love politics and Star Wars. Any really stand out? I thought the Bloodline was very good. Yes, for politics in the canon, Bloodline was excellent. I think that Bloodline is a superb example of how to write politics in Star Wars. I also think that the politics in the book Cloak of Deception were really good. And I think that the politics in the book Darth Plagueis were really good. That being said, there are times that I think it's been done where they focused on the politics and did a poor job of it. I think that the YA Padme trilogy, I think that trilogy was a misstep. I think that trilogy didn't handle politics that well. And I will say that another one that it's not, politics isn't in the forefront, but it's very prominent, kind of. I don't know how to, that's the same thing. It's not in the forefront, but it's very much there, is in Catalyst and Tarkin. Politics was done pretty good there. It was more bureaucracy than it was politics. That was enjoyable. And then I think that also the politics in the Aftermath trilogy and in the Thrawn trilogy, the new Thrawn books, the same thing. It's not prominent, but it's very much there, and it was very enjoyable there. So I'd say those are a few recommendations. But of course, Bloodline is the end-all be-all politics for Star Wars book. And then I'd say Cloak of Deception and Darth Plagueis as well. Next is Revan 1207 says, I need to read some Dan Wells. I love his podcast with Sanderson. Me too. That's how I got into him. I just watched Brandon Sanderson, and then I heard Dan Wells on the podcast and on a few other things, and I just became a fan of the way he talks. And so there was a convention, and Dan Wells was going to be signing at the convention. And so I went and I bought a bunch of books, and he wasn't there yet. He was supposed to come in. He was a couple hours late. So I just sat down and I was just started devouring his first book, I Am Not a Serial Killer. And I loved it. And so I told I talked to him for like 45 minutes the first time. The second time I only talked to him for like 10 minutes, 15. It wasn't that much. But the first time I talked to him, he talked to me for 45 minutes because there was no one else in line. It was the coolest experience. The fact that an author would give me, I wasn't interviewing him or anything the first time. He was just talking with me as a fan, someone who was interested in talking with him. And so he was just a genuinely nice guy. And his Twitter is weird. But he's a nice guy, and he's really entertaining on the podcast. And you also see here, he's so much fun to listen to. Love the food heist stories. Yes, his food heists are good, but he also challenges his Brandon, because Brandon's much more traditional in what he wants in a story, and Dan is much more, no, give me the weird stuff. And so the way they go back and forth on that is really, they work well as a team. We get the two of them together. That's why they're like they're yin and yang in a lot of ways. The next thing is Arthur Lowry says, I'd recommend you keep the Join Resistance trilogy in the back of your head in case you see a sale somewhere. I'd be surprised if you didn't like it. I will look into it. I think that's Ben Acker and Ben Blacker. I think I will read those eventually. And Blueberry Comics, yes, they absolutely need to co-write a book, and they're co-writing Dark One, where basically what they did was Brandon made the outline, Dan wrote the first draft, and now Brandon's editing the draft. So it should probably come out either next year or the year after. But they need to do like lots of collaborations, because Brandon's good at collaborations, and Dan Wells is just such a good writer as well. So I would buy that book instantly. No question. I mean, I buy a lot of their books. I buy every Brandon Sanderson book anyway, but I would for sure buy that one, because that'd be so cool. There are some authors that I'm like, I just want to see you team up just to see what it would be like. Like I would really like to see Timothy Zahn and Kevin Anderson team up. I don't think that their styles are compatible, but that would definitely be chaotic fun. The next comment I have is Blu-ray Comics. Just out of curiosity, are there any Star Wars novellas out there? There are. There is one novella collection that came out. If I can pull it out, this is a collection of novellas for Canto Bight. There's 4 novellas in here by the authors Saladin Ahmed, Ray Carson, Myra Grant, and John Jackson Miller. The first 3 short novellas are like 60 to 80 pages. I thought they were entertaining, but the one by John Jackson Miller was just like so fast paced and so crazy fun. That one was called The Ride. That one's really, really good stuff. And I know that Timothy Zahn has written some novellas, and then you have something of the Bounty Hunters, the Tales of the Bounty Hunters that Kevin Anderson edited. It's 4 novellas. It's got him, it's got Dave Wolverton, and it's got 2 other writers. So that is a novella collection. And then there were some e-novellas that have been released. But the problem is, for Star Wars does really good in hardcover. Like, it's surprising that like whenever they hit the list, they don't hit the combined list, the ebook list. They hit the hardcover list. And I think that the hardcovers are the big seller in addition to the audiobooks. And it's kind of hard to convince people to buy a hardcover of a novella, because they tend to be really, really small. And so it's a lot of money that you're spending to make them novella and not a lot of content. So that's why it's harder to get Star Wars novellas. But if they can do collections of them, like they did for Canto Bight, this book didn't sell that well. It really didn't. It's really sad, because the last story in here is worth the price of admission, in my opinion. But it's nice to get bind-ups like this. So, yeah. Arthur Lowry says, Thrawn Ascendancy has great Chiss-specific politics. Our opinions on Zahn are similar, as I'm finding Ascendancy is the best Zahn I've read since my favorite series, the duology. Hey! Oh, you just made my day, because nobody loves the duology like I do. I love the Thrawn duology, so it's so cool to see that you like it. But I think that the Ascendancy trilogy, it was so tight. It felt like when he started the first book, he knew exactly where the last book was going to be. He had outlined everything. He had mapped it out. He wrote it super fast. He wrote it faster than any other trilogy he's written. And so it was so nice to see him get to tell a big story. And it was like, quality was great and the politics were great. And it just felt like a science fiction series, like an epic science fiction series that had a few Star Wars elements. I think that was another risk that may not have been the biggest seller for Star Wars, but I think it was a worthwhile risk. It was a good way to combine the new with the familiar. The familiar is Thrawn. The new is this part of space we've never seen before, really. And so it was a great payoff. And I really liked the way he liked science fiction. If you liked that Chiss Ascendancy trilogy, let me recommend another trilogy by him that's not Star Wars called the Conquerors trilogy. That trilogy was spectacular and has a lot of similarities to the Chiss Ascendancy trilogy. Blueberry Comics, yeah, you said they should co-write a book, and Revan1207 says they're so chaotic together, but it's so much fun, right? Arthur Lowry says those frog guys in Canto Bight were hilarious. They indeed were. And the fact that you had three of them, they were basically kind of like, I just realized this now, they were basically like minions, but in Star Wars, kind of. They were kind of those three minions from the Minions movies. They were super entertaining. And of course, you have the guy who's just trying to make the money back so he can pay off debts. And he's trying to do it by gambling, which is not a smart question, but that is funny. I do like the frog guys. I wish they would do more with Canto Bight, because the only place they used Canto Bight so far, outside of the movie and outside of that novella collection, was in the Legends of Luke Skywalker, and I did not like that book at all. So they need to use it somewhere else to give it a good taste. Fernando Rosales, hello, welcome, says, random question. How many words per minute can you read? Interesting. I haven't like docked it. Like, I have not like officially checked. I'm typically close to, I want to say like 250, 300, maybe sometimes a little bit more. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's for like 400 or 5. I don't know. I can tell you that I can read about 100 pages in about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how thick the book is, depending on how small the print, depending on how difficult the material is to digest. It usually takes me about an hour to an hour and a half to read about 100 pages. So I think that's a pretty fast pace. That being said, sometimes I can read 300 pages in like 2 hours because I'm just like, oh, gotta keep going, and just keep reading so fast. But then there are times that I just don't read. Sometimes there's some books, especially nonfiction books, I read way slower. So it varies. It very much varies book to book. Like, and I always know this: the beginning of a book I read much slower. The end of a book I read much faster. As an example, I just read A Time for Mercy. Yeah, it took me about an hour and a half to read the first 100 pages. Then it took me about 2 hours to read the next 200 pages, and then the last 300 pages I also read in 2 hours. So like my reading speed increased as I went along, because I just got more and more into the book, and I wanted to find out what happened. So Fernando Rosales says, do you have a system? My system is just, I have goals. I'm very much a goal-oriented person. If I know I have to reach a goal, I will reach it. So if I can reach a goal, I say, all right, I'm going to read 100 pages in the next hour and a half. And I make sure I do. I say, all right, turn off all the electronics. Let's do it. And I feel focused, and I feel like I'm in a competition with myself. I'm going to read it, darn it. And so that's the best for me that I thought. That's the best way it works for me. I'm very much competition. That's how I do books in general. Is I'm going to read 100 books this year. That means I need to read about 8 books a month. So darn it, I'm going to read 8 books a month. So that's my system. Arthur Lowry says, I like some stories from Legends of Luke Skywalker. I did not enjoy the story with the weird salivating bug thing that was controlling Luke. I did not either. I really didn't enjoy any of this. There's one story that it was like, ooh, we're going to get some answers about. Nope, that didn't have any answers. And I was like, I just didn't love that really anything in that book, sadly. If you loved it, some elements of it, that's good. But and I think Ken Liu can write well, because like Patrick Leo says that Ken Liu is one of his favorite authors now, but he's not caught my attention yet. But we'll see if I read his fantasy stuff, if I like it as much as I disliked his Star Wars stuff, because that's really towards the bottom of the barrel for Star Wars for me. It's not Ronin. That's the bottom, but it's pretty low. Ridiculous Otaku says, yo, I was finally able to catch a stream. Glad that you're able to join us, Ridiculous Otaku. I will be here for a few more minutes before I have to leave. But I'm glad that you're able to join us. Fernando says, thanks for the answer. Revan1207, are there any particular places where you like to read? I actually, in this room, I can't show you because of the angle and because of the lights, you wouldn't be able to see it. But in this room, right behind the camera, I have a chair, and I have another chair that I put my feet on. And so I put the two together. And so that's where I read. That's really the only place in the house I read. Occasionally, I go to the couch that's out there, but my brother's usually on the couch, so I usually avoid that, let him be on the couch, and I just go in my special chair. But my special chair is that's where I'm read 99% of the time. It's one place. It can be boring. So basically what I do is I read like 100 pages and then I get up and stretch, walk around for about 10 minutes and then go back, read another 100 pages because I am really hyperactive. So if I have sat for like 2 or 3 hours at a time, but I felt mentally exhausted because I didn't get to run around. So let's go to the next one. Lazy Fishy says, fastest I have ever read a book was Path of Destruction in 3 days. LOL. That's about 130 pages a day. That's a pretty good rate. If you can keep that up, you'll be reading, 2 books a week. You'll be approaching, maybe 50 to 100 books a year. So if you can get that up, that'd be great. The next is from the ridiculous otaku. What are your thoughts on the sequel trilogy? As someone who likes 2 of the 3 films, I'm sad how little books we get from that era. We need more books from that era. I always say, even if I dislike something in Star Wars, I want books from it because more books in Star Wars is also always great. We did get Shadow of the Sith, which answered a lot of questions. It's not the most entertaining Star Wars book, but it does answer a lot of questions. So if I would suggest that one to you, ridiculous otaku. Tim Adams says, if you could only read one book for the rest of your life, which would it be and why? Well, obviously, I will say 3 from 3 different types of things because I can't just say one. If I'm going fiction, it's Elantris by Brandon Sanderson because it's my favorite novel of all time. I can reread and reread and reread that. It's always amazing. Every time, it's always better. If I'm going with general nonfiction, I would go with 48 Laws of Power because that book, it's all stories and it's all just so creative and it's so incredibly informative on how to utilize power. That being said, the third and most important book would probably be the Bible. So that's what I would have to say. The Bible, Elantris, and 48 Laws of Power. I can't narrow it down to one. I just can't. I don't like narrowing. And as a book reader, I like having more. I do not like having less. So I don't like being put in parameters. I can only read a few books. So Arthur Lowry says, good news for you, sir. It looks like the audio play and the script book for the next High Republic adventure are releasing on the same day this time. Woo! I hope you're right, because that was a mistake for the previous one because it messed up the release schedule. The reviewers who did audiobooks reviewed it instantly. Those of us like me who are only print people, I only ever read the print version. We got it months later. Nobody cared. It's like we got Datsun. Oh, we got the script version. See, nobody cares. Like it had fizzled out by that point. So I am excited to have that if that ends up happening. I thought they were originally on different release dates, but if they're now the same release date, that is very exciting. Fernando Rosales says, have you read anything from Ted Dekker? Yes, I read his Circle series. Black, red, white, and green. I thought that the initial trilogy, Black, Red, and White, some of the best books I ever read. Amazing fantasy books. I even put them high up on my fantasy ranking my fantasy series ranking because it's just so good. That being said, the 4th book, Green, let me down. It let me down so hard. I was so disappointed in Green. But I want to read more books from Ted Dekker. I just haven't sought them out because I have so many other things too. Arthur Lowry says, join Resistance from that era. Yes. So if you are wanting more Star Wars books from the post Return of the Jedi era or the sequel era, because they want them to expand and tell more types of stories, Join the Resistance does do that. Fernando Rosales says, you have to read Saint. You are going to like it. Yes, I've heard Saint is one of his good ones. I've heard that a few of his others are very good. Why can't I remember? There's one, I think 3, or is it 7? No, it's 3. Whatever. He wrote like a kind of horror-ish type thriller book that I heard was really good. And then he co-wrote House with Frank Peretti. Yeah, it's 3, yeah. He co-wrote House with Frank Peretti. Impossible question from Johan Herrenberg. Your favorite Star Wars characters in books? Ooh, I'm glad you said that, Johan, because I have a video that I'm going to be recording this week and releasing in the month of October, which is about my favorite characters in the canon novels. I am not talking about the legends yet. I'll do a separate video for that, but just talking about my favorite characters. I'm going to talk about characters exclusive to the canon novels. For one, they haven't used the movie characters too much, but for two, because I like talking about people specific in the books, so it's not just I like Obi-Wan. No, I want to talk specifically book characters. And I have a few that I think will surprise some people and how high up they are on my list, because I have a few interesting characters that I loved. So I do have that video coming soon. All right, everyone. It is now 5 o'clock Eastern time on the East Coast. I unfortunately have to run. I am getting a little bit tired. I have also have some things going on tonight. But thank you so much for joining us for this 1,500 subscribers celebration and for the new bookshelf live stream and the Ask Me Anything. It was so much fun talking with all you guys. Thank you for everyone who attended. I will have another one in a couple more weeks. But thank you so much. Bye.